Welcome to the video where I remove the U-joint from my drive shaft on my 1990 Ford Bronco project vehicle. You can see that the universal joint was a little bit sloppy. It didn't have a lot of play in it, but it just wasn't really tight. And being as I was doing a lot of rebuilding on the rear end of this vehicle, I decided I would do the universal joints anyways, since I was there. So the first step you're going to do is remove all of the retaining clips that are on the universal joint. And these most universal joints come with new clips, so you don't really need to keep these in good shape. So if you do need to pry and bend on them, it'll be okay. So generally what you'll use is a pair of needle nose pliers. You'll squeeze them and pry them out with some screwdrivers. Here you can see that I have removed all of the retaining clips, and now I'm using a ball joint removal tool. This can also be used for universal joints. So what you end up doing is you put the screw side on the end of the universal joint, and you just tighten it up, and that will actually push that cap right out. And on the other end, the side opposite the screw, you can see it's open, and that cap will end up pushing right inside that opening. Once you get it pushed in, you can just either remove it with a pair of pliers or your hand, and you'll notice that even though you removed one of the caps, you still can't get that universal joint out. So what you end up having to do is you'll end up having to push that universal joint back through the hole and continue to push it until it pops out the other side. So the key here is to make sure that the threaded side is lined up with the universal joint, and on the other side make sure that the cap isn't going to hit that the back side of that ball joint removal tool, because if it does hit it, you won't be able to push it the rest of the way out. So here you can see I'm using a 22 millimeter wrench, and I'm just turning that screw, and it's pushing that universal joint cap out the other side. Now that the second universal joint cap has been pushed out, you can just remove it with your hand or pliers, and then you can see that this flange just basically comes off. You pull it over to the left, and then you pull it out, and it just pops right out. There I'm just showing you the needle bearings inside of the caps. And those are usually what will go bad in a universal joint, is those needles end up with a lack of grease, and then they just sort of wear out. They can break, they can wear out, they can freeze up. So that's, like I said, that's generally where the issues occur. Here you can see that I'm doing exactly the same method. I'm just pushing on one side of the universal. It pushes the cap out. So that cap I can remove with a pair of pliers, and then you just put the ball joint pusher on the other side and push the universal back through, and here you can see it's working its way back through. I've flipped it up here so you can see it actually get pushed all the way through. Sorry it's a little bit shaky. I like to hook this down with a clamp if possible to a SolidWorks area. Right here I'm just working outside because it was hot in my garage. And there you can see I've removed both caps, and the universal joint just pops right out. It's always a good practice to clean up those bores a little bit and get some of the dust, dirt, and grease off. So here I'm just removing the new universal joint, and then just looking at it, making sure it's the right size and everything, and pulling off a pair of caps. So here you're going to want to make sure that that Zerk fitting, if your universal has one, is pointing in the same direction that it was on the one that you took out. Here we're putting in the new universal joint, sticking it in place, sliding the two caps in place. And now here you're going to want to make sure that the shafts of the universal joint are lined up nicely with those caps, because if you start pushing them in and they're not lined up well, it can actually break some of the needle bearings, or push some of the needle bearings out, or just give you a general hard time. So here I'm just pushing in that first cap, and verifying that everything is lined up before continuing. So the nice part about lining it up in this position is as you are tightening it, you can actually look down beside the threaded end of your tool and see how far you need to push it in. Here you can see I've pushed that in. I've started that second cap, and then I'm just getting ready to push it in with my tool. So depending on your local auto parts store, you may be able to borrow one of these ball joint pushers. If you cannot, or you decide you want to purchase this tool, you can use the link below in the description to purchase one of these. So here you can see that I've pushed both caps in roughly to where they belong. And now I will install the retaining clips. So these retaining clips are relatively easy to install, and like I said, your universals will probably come with them. So you do it basically in reverse order. You squeeze with your needle nose pliers and you push them down with your hand if you can. You get them started in the bore. Then I always take a punch with a hammer and tap it down so it drops into the groove. You'll see it drop into the groove because those two little tabs that you're compressing with your pliers will actually spread out as it goes into the groove. So here you can see I'm tapping that second retaining clip down into the bore, and then I'm just tapping it into the groove because this one was a little bit tight, but you can see that space between those tabs opens up as it goes into the groove, and that's a visual indicator that the retaining clip is where it belongs. So here I'm just removing the other two caps to place that flange on, and then start the caps. So this job can be done using a ball joint pusher like what I'm using. It can also be used. You can also use a hydraulic press, and I've actually seen some people do this job with just a hammer and a punch. I don't recommend the hammer and the punch. Obviously, a hydraulic press is fantastic if you actually have a hydraulic press, but if you don't have a hydraulic press, like I said, you can get one of these from your local auto parts store as a tool loaner, or you can purchase one. So here I've pushed in the third out of the four caps on that universal joint, and I'm getting ready to press in the fourth one. Now, if at any point throughout this whole process that it really starts to push hard, you're going to want to stop and make sure that you've got everything lined up, and that the caps are going in straight, and also that your needle bearings are fully installed and one hasn't fallen out and gotten trapped down in the bottom. So at any point, if things just don't seem to be going in easily, you're going to want to stop and review to make sure that you're not binding up and causing any irreparable damage. Here you can see I'm just putting in the last of the retaining clips, and you can see that they do just kind of drop in. At this point, the universal is installed, and remember that if you do purchase a universal that has a grease fitting, it's only got a little bit of grease in it, and you're going to need to go back and fully grease this. Now you can continue to pump the grease into it until the grease starts coming out all four caps. At that point you can reinstall your drive shaft. So I'd like to thank you for joining me on this video, and have a great day. Goodbye.